They laughed when the female sniper asked for a rifle, until the SEALs learned her code name. The desert wind carried the sound of gunfire like ghosts whispering across the valley. When the woman in the dust-stained uniform asked for a rifle, every man in the platoon laughed. 3 hours later, those same men would whisper her code name, not in mockery, but in reverence. Lieutenant David Mason had seen replacements before, too clean, too young, too unaware of the noise the world could make when it was tearing itself apart. But the woman who stepped off the incoming jeep that morning was different. She moved quietly, deliberately, like she'd rehearsed every step. Her name tag read Corporal Elise Ward, field medic. Her uniform was crisp, her boots unscuffed, and her eyes, cold grey, unblinking, took in the perimeter without a word. Around her, SEAL Team 9 was a mess of dust, sweat, and exhaustion. They'd been pinned for 71 hours in a sun-cracked basin that used to be a farming village before artillery flattened it. They were running low on water, lower on ammo, and dangerously close to giving up hope. "Medic?" Williams had asked, his tone halfway between relief and mockery. "We needed bullets, not Band-Aids." Elise didn't flinch. She dropped her medic pack, crouched beside the wounded, and began working. Her hands were fast, her motions precise, no wasted movement. Mason watched in silence. In 15 minutes, she stabilized 3 men and saved one from bleeding out. She never looked up, never asked for thanks. When she finally spoke, it was only to say, "You should move your command post 50 meters west." "You're sitting in their sight line," Williams smirked. "You know that from your medical training?" She looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. "No, from experience." The heat shimmered between them. Somewhere beyond the ridge, an enemy sniper cracked a round that tore through the dirt at her feet. She didn't even blink, just shifted her weight, grabbed her pack, and moved on. Mason's instinct, the one that had kept him alive through 4 deployments, whispered something he couldn't name yet. This woman wasn't just a medic. She was something else. By sunset, Elise had earned the grudging respect of every man breathing in that crater, not through words, but through work. Her voice was calm even when the mortars started falling again. Her hands didn't shake, not once, not even when stitching a wound by flashlight while rounds snapped overhead. Mason watched her between bursts of fire. There was something in her silence. Not fear, not pride, something colder. Distance. She treated every life like a mission, not a person. No jokes, no stories, not even a sigh. Later that night, when the shelling stopped, Mason found her cleaning her instruments by the glow of a broken tablet screen. "You from the 41st?" he asked. She nodded without looking up. "Why'd they transfer you out here?" Her cloth paused on the blade of a scalpel. "Because I asked," he frowned. "Most people ask to get out of here. I'm not most people." There was no arrogance in it, just fact. The kind of tone people used when they'd stopped explaining themselves long ago. Mason wanted to press further, but the radio crackled before he could. Command was still silent. No air support. No extraction. Just static and stars. Across the trench, Williams muttered, "You think she's CIA? Spook type?" Reeves shook her head. "Doesn't matter. She knows what she's doing." When Elise finally stood to move, her shadow stretched across the dirt, small but steady. The kind of steady that comes from surviving things that break other people. That night, as the men drifted into restless sleep, Mason stayed awake. He kept thinking about that moment when she'd said she asked to come. In a war no one volunteered for, what kind of person does that? Outside, the wind carried a faint metallic hum, the sound of distant gunfire or memory. The next morning, the sky was colorless, a hard, blinding white. Heat shimmered off the ground, warping everything in sight. The men had learned to move quietly, to conserve their strength. But Elise never seemed to slow. She worked her way through the perimeter, checking the wounded, rationing morphine. Her uniform was streaked with dust now, her sleeves rolled, her eyes hidden behind dark smudges. "Ma'am," a young private whispered as she tightened his bandage, "you're not scared, are you?" She didn't answer, just tightened the strap one notch more. "Fear's fine," she said finally. "It's what you do with it that matters." By mid-afternoon, they were hit again, mortars walking closer. Mason shouted orders. Men scrambled for cover. Elise dragged one of the wounded toward a trench, just before a shell slammed into the ground behind them. The blast threw her forward, ripped her sleeve open, and covered her in grit. Williams saw it happen and cursed. "Medic down!" But when the dust cleared, Elise was already moving, helping another soldier whose leg was pinned under debris. Blood streaked her arm, but she ignored it. After the barrage, when things went still again, Mason crouched beside her. "You should have stayed back. That was suicide." She met his eyes. "You asked for fighters, not cowards." He stared at her, trying to read what lived behind those grey eyes. Something flickered there, not pride, memory. That night, while the team slept, she walked to the edge of the ridge alone, scanning the horizon through a cracked pair of binoculars. Her hands were steady, her breathing even. In the reflection of the glass, a faint tattoo showed beneath the dirt on her wrist, an emblem Mason recognized but couldn't place. He didn't ask yet, but the question had begun to burn. It started as a rumor, a name carried in low voices. Williams heard it first, whispered over the comms. A single word, Specter. He asked Mason, Mason asked Reeves. No one knew where it came from. Later that day, Mason caught Elise near the weapons cache, the sealed steel container reserved for SEAL operators only. She was staring at it, motionless, like it was breathing. "Something you need, Corporal?" Mason asked. She didn't turn. "Permission to access the emergency cache, sir." Mason blinked. "That cache is restricted. Even I haven't cracked it open. I know what's in it," she said quietly. Her tone wasn't guessing. It was remembering. Williams scoffed from behind them. "You kidding me? What's next? You're going to ask for a sniper rifle, too?" Elise finally turned. Yes. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Then came the laughter, low, cruel, born of exhaustion. "You shoot, Doc?" Williams asked, grinning. Elise didn't blink. "I hit what I aim at." Something in the way she said it made Mason's skin tighten. The men's laughter faded under the weight of her calm. "Tell me, Corporal," Mason said. "Why does a medic need a rifle?" Her eyes drifted toward the eastern ridge. "Because someone's been painting our coordinates since dawn. He's their spotter. Kill him, and you save the rest." Mason studied her, the precision in her tone, the certainty. This wasn't theory. It was skill, hard-earned. "Who trained you?" He asked. She just said, "Someone who doesn't exist anymore." By dusk, Mason made his decision. Against regulation, against reason, he ordered Williams to open the cache. Williams swore under his breath but obeyed. The locks clicked open with a hiss, and inside lay a set of components wrapped in oiled cloth, an antique Leupold scope, a bipod, a worn leather glove, and a sniper's field book filled with neat, hand-drawn wind charts. Elise touched them like a pianist greeting forgotten keys. Williams crossed his arms. "You've got 5 minutes, Florence Nightingale." She ignored him, assembling the rifle piece by piece with movements too smooth, too practiced. When the barrel clicked into place, Mason finally asked, "You've done this before?" She paused, just briefly. "Once. Codename?" he asked, almost jokingly. For the first time, she looked straight at him. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Specter." The name hit the air like a shot. Mason froze. Even William's smirk faltered. Everyone knew that code name, a ghost story whispered in the community. A female marksman whose confirmed record was classified, whose identity was erased after a Black Ops mission went south. Specter was killed in Helmand 7 years ago, Mason said slowly. Elise closed the bolt on the rifle. Then I guess I'm a ghost. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Mason simply nodded. You've got your rifle, Corporal. Make the shot count. She adjusted the scope, scanning the ridge, her eyes calm and ancient. I always do. The ridge was quiet except for the whisper of wind, dragging dust over stone. The sun had begun to sink, casting long shadows that turned the desert gold. Elise and Williams crawled the last 50 meters in silence, their rifles slung low, the heat still shimmering in the distance. Williams breathed hard, muttering between clenched teeth. You really think you can see him from here? She didn't answer, just unfolded the bipod and lay flat against the earth. Her movements were so controlled that even the air seemed to pause. She scanned the valley, eyes behind the scope reflecting shards of sky. Then finally she said, There, second outcrop from the left, behind the rock with the broken ridgeline. Williams followed her sightline but saw nothing. I can't. Because you're looking for a man, she said. Look for what doesn't move. He squinted again, then he saw it, and a faint shimmer, the glint of glass catching sun. The spotter, hidden, patient, deadly. How far? He asked. 800 meters. He laughed once, hollow. You're insane. Elise adjusted the scope. Wind 6 knots, left to right, elevation -4. Her voice softened, almost distant. Breath, bone, pulse, memory. When she exhaled, the world seemed to stop. The trigger broke like glass. One shot. The shimmer vanished. Williams blinked. Jesus, you hit him. Elise didn't smile. She simply closed the bolt and whispered, He won't paint you again. Below, Mason's voice cracked over comms. Spotter down. Their fire's blind now. For the first time in 72 hours, the valley went still. Williams looked at her, the medic, the ghost, the woman who shouldn't exist, and finally understood what kind of person doesn't flinch under fire, the kind who's already died once. That night, Mason found her sitting alone by the ridge, cleaning her rifle by moonlight. He approached quietly. You going to tell me who you really are? She didn't look up. You already know. He sat across from her. Specter was a legend. You were credited with 70 confirmed hits. Then your unit vanished, she nodded once. We were sent in to retrieve a hostage. Intel was wrong. Ambush. Everyone died but me. Command called it a failed op. Easier to erase a ghost than to explain a mistake. Mason studied her face, calm, unblinking. So you came back? I never left, she said softly. They buried a name, not a person. Her eyes met his, steady and hollow. You asked why I wanted this post. It's because I'm good at losing things. Mason felt the words cut deeper than they should have. You're not the only one who's lost people, he said quietly. Elise nodded, the corner of her mouth twitching, not a smile, but something near it. Difference is, Lieutenant, you still believe it matters. The desert wind carried silence between them, long and heavy. Mason wanted to say something, anything, but before he could, the horizon flashed. The night sky lit up red. Incoming fire. Elise stood instantly, snapping the scope back onto her rifle. They've found their commander's body, she said. They'll hit harder now. Then we hold, Mason said. She looked toward the ridge. No, we move. They moved at dawn. The heat was merciless. a pale orange sun rising over a world that had already burned too long. Mason split the squad, half to relocate the wounded, half to fortify the new position. Elise stayed behind to cover them. Williams objected, of course. "You can't cover that distance alone." "I don't need to," she said. "I just need them to think I can." She climbed onto the ridge, her rifle resting across her knees. The radio buzzed with fragments of commands, screams, gunfire. Down below, the SEALs moved like ghosts through dust and smoke. The first round came within seconds, a direct hit on their former position. The second followed faster. Elise fired between blasts, each shot deliberate, surgical. She wasn't shooting to kill, she was shooting to make them afraid. Through her scope, she could see them scatter, duck, regroup. The enemy had no spotter now, no direction. Then a mortar shell hit close. Too close. The concussion threw her sideways, dirt raining down. Her ear rang, blood trailing from her temple. She blinked the world back into focus and crawled toward her rifle. Mason's voice crackled over. "Comms! Ward, fall back! That's an order!" She pressed the comm to her chest. "Negative. You're not clear yet." "Elise." But her tone changed, calm, steady. "You gave me the rifle, sir. Let me use it." The next shot cracked the morning open like glass. Down below, Williams saw it. 3 enemy silhouettes dropped before they could reload. Mason stared through the haze, his chest tight. Some legends, he realized, don't need resurrection. They just need a reason to return. By midday, the valley burned. Smoke curled in thick black ribbons across the skyline. The team had made it to the bunker. Reinforced walls, partial shade. A chance. But Elise wasn't with them. Williams paced near the entrance, muttering, "She's not coming back. You saw that blast." Mason ignored him, scanning the ridge through binoculars. Every few seconds he saw it. The flicker of muzzle flash. "Still fighting, still covering them. She's alive," he said. Reeves touched his shoulder. "Even if she is, she won't be for long." The words barely left her lips when Mason saw it. The streak of tracer fire, the spray of dust, then nothing. "Elise," he whispered into the radio. "Do you copy?" Static. Then faintly, "Still here." Her breathing was ragged. Took one through the shoulder. "Not bad enough to quit." "Fall back, Corporal. That's an order." "Negative. You move first." Mason slammed his fist into the dirt. "You don't get to play hero." Her voice was fading but steady. "Wasn't playing." Another explosion rocked the horizon. Mason looked at Reeves, then back toward the ridge. He knew she couldn't last much longer. "Williams, get ready to move. We're bringing her home." Williams hesitated. "Sir, that's suicide." Mason's jaw tightened. "Then let's die trying." They reached the ridge just as the sun began to bleed into the mountains. Smoke turned gold in the dying light. Elise was half buried in dust, her left arm slick with blood, her right still gripping the rifle. Her eyes opened when she heard them approach. "Took you long enough," she said weakly. Mason knelt beside her. "We're getting you out." She smiled faintly. "You'll slow down if you carry me." "Don't care." Williams scanned the horizon. "We've got company." Shapes emerged through the haze. A dozen enemy soldiers closing in. Mason raised his weapon, firing bursts, covering as Reeves pressed bandages against Elise's wound. Elise reached for the rifle again. "Give it here!" "You're done," Mason said. Her tone dropped low, final. "Lieutenant, if I don't stop them, none of us leave." He hesitated, then handed her the rifle. She rolled to her stomach, wincing, blood dripping into the sand. Through the scope the world sharpened. "Wind 2 knots right, elevation -1, she whispered. Williams whispered. "You can't even see straight." She smiled. "Don't need to. I just remember." She fired once, twice, 3 times, each shot an echo of her name, her past, her promise. The ridge held, the team moved, and when the last shot faded, Mason turned, but Elise wasn't moving anymore. Her face was calm, the rifle still warm. Mason knelt, his hand trembling as he pressed his fingers to her wrist. No pulse. The wind picked up, carrying her last whisper through the smoke. "Tell them Specter finally finished the mission." The battlefield was quiet now, the kind of quiet that only comes after the last heartbeat fades. Mason sat beside her body as the wind dragged the smell of smoke and cordite through the air. Around him, the team packed gear, tended wounds, and avoided looking at her. Reeves placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have to move before sunset." He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the dog tag glinting in the dust. "Specter," it read, etched beneath her false name. Williams swallowed hard. "Never thought I'd see a ghost bleed." Mason turned sharply. "She wasn't a ghost. She was the reason any of us are alive." The words came out like gravel, torn from somewhere deep. They wrapped her body in a torn flag. Not regulation, not ceremonial, but it was all they had. Mason lifted her himself. She weighed less than he expected. As they began the long walk back through the valley, the sun dipped behind the ridge, the same ridge she had defended alone, the same ground she had chosen to die on. Mason didn't look back. He knew she would have hated that. 3 weeks later, the desert felt like a dream someone else had. The base smelled of disinfectant and paper. Mason sat under flickering fluorescent lights, facing 2 men in suits, intelligence officers, clean, precise, detached. "Lieutenant Mason," one said, flipping a file. "You filed that the late Corporal Elise Ward was previously known as Specter. Classified?" "Yes, sir." The man nodded, unimpressed. "You're aware that identity was erased from all records?" "I'm aware," Mason said flatly. "Then why include it in your report?" He leaned forward, eyes cold. "Because she earned it back." The officer paused, studying him. "Lieutenant, this mission was off the books. If her name resurfaces, she's dead," Mason interrupted. "What's left to protect? Her secret or her legacy?" The man hesitated, then closed the folder. "You'll receive commendations for this operation." But this conversation never happened. As they left the room, Mason whispered to the empty chair beside him, "They'll forget you, Elise, but I won't." The ceremony was small, too small for what it meant. A hangar, a few rows of folding chairs, the hum of engines outside. Mason stood at attention as the commander read the citation. "For extraordinary courage under fire, and for actions that directly saved the lives of her unit." He stopped there. The rest of the words, selfless service, honor beyond duty, sounded hollow. Mason stepped forward, took the medal meant for her, and held it for a long moment. Then, ignoring the murmurs around him, he walked straight out into the open air. Outside, the sun burned low over the tarmac. He unclipped the medal, crouched beside a small wooden crate, the one holding her belongings, and placed it on top. "She didn't need a medal," he said softly. "She already had a name." That night Mason went through her field pack. Inside were the usual things: bandages, cartridges, a small knife, and one sealed envelope. His name was written on it. He opened it carefully. "Mason, if you're reading this, I didn't make it back. Don't waste time feeling guilty. This was the only way it could end. People like me don't get peace. We give it to others. If they ask who I was, tell them I was a medic, a soldier, a friend. And if they ever need a ghost again, tell them Specter's watching." The paper trembled in his hands. He folded it gently and slipped it into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. Months passed. Mason's hair grew longer, his uniform faded, and the desert found its way into his dreams. He returned to the ridge one last time. The world was quiet again, the valley green with the first traces of rain. He carried a small metal plate, the one that used to hang from her rifle stock. Specter carved in crude letters. He knelt and pressed it into the soil. "Mission complete," he whispered. A breeze rose, soft and warm, curling dust around him like smoke. For a moment he could almost hear her voice. "Wind 2 knots right. Elevation -1, he smiled barely. "Still correcting me." The sun dropped low, painting the sky gold. Mason turned, walking back toward the horizon, one soldier carrying the memory of another. They say ghosts don't bleed. They say soldiers don't cry, but those who were there know the truth. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do isn't to survive. It's to stay behind so others can. Her name never made it into the reports. Her story was buried under numbers and codes, but in every quiet campfire, in every new recruit's whisper, one name still travels on the wind, and somewhere in the fading hum of the desert night, if you listen closely, you can still hear a single gunshot, the one that saved them all.